On today's podcast, the testers become the testees. Oh, wait.
Maybe we can pull a listicle into this.
Welcome to the Man Space Podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome, spacemen. See, all be just smooth and fluing. Dang it!
Way to ruin it, Rob.
We already started.
I have to start again.
Nope. This is just going. And you should know I'm supposed to announce. You can watch this episode that you're listening to right now on your phone on YouTube, and you can see our faces.
At 2:30, right?
At 2:30 p.m.
2:30 p.m. on Wednesday.
2:30 p.m. Central
time.
Yeah.
Because we live in Central time.
Right, but
The posters.
the person who is doing it is in Utah.
And I told Mike I was going to do this because I wanted to see it. Remember my hat? You said I look like a train conductor?
Because you look like a train conductor, dude.
I'll do the whole episode like this.
Oh my gosh.
Not true, I won't. I won't be able to keep. I want the nice flat.
Super. What do you know?
You got to tilt it forward a little bit.
Like this?
Oh, yeah. There you
Yeah. Now you look like a train conductor or a pitcher from the 1970s.
Yep.
Have you guys seen the Savannah banana slugs?
Yeah, they're freaking hilarious.
I've heard I haven't.
They're like the
They
Harlem
make up all sorts of
Globetrotters
rules.
Yeah, they're the Harlem
Like a fan-
Globetrotters for baseball. It's
A
hilarious.
fan caught a foul ball, so they counted as an out.
Yeah.
Are they just like playing each other?
They have.
No,
There's
they-
one other team they play.
Oh,
They don't
okay.
play. It's
Oh, they
not. No.
Oh,
Because whoever they
Who
play,
will
they
play
would
by
have to
those
buy
rules.
into their
Yeah.
rules. And so I think there's one of the party animals is I think the other team. And I think they just go around and do exhibition games like the Harlem Globetrotters do.
oh, fine.
That's my understanding anyway. But they're pretty funny. Like their walk-up songs are hilarious.
Mhm.
And like often they'll like
They do it.
the dude will like
field-
start in the stand with all the fans, and the
Mhm.
song will start, and he'll just like start singing it and dancing, and dances his way up to the plate.
Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
One time the batter got beaned, and so he laid down, but he got a free base, right? Like he got knocked over. So his teammates came out, picked him up, dragged him down to first, stood him up on the bag, and then walked away.
It's not a bag. It's on plate.
No,
Dang it,
they put him on first, and then
I don't
it is a
deserve to wear
bag.
this hat.
You don't. You clearly don't understand the
Put
rules
it away and go to the back of the train.
of badminton.
I have Sig Hansen from Deadliest Catch
Deadliest
laugh.
Catch.
It's horrifying.
Oh, wait. That's like the crab people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking,
Oh, the Alaska shows?
no, what's the other one where it's like river monsters or something?
Oh, is that where they do the noodling to catch the catfish?
No, but they catch all sorts of crazy fish.
I did see a short the other day, and it was this lady talking about, I don't know, she had a catfish, and she had her arm stuffed through its gills,
That's how they catch them.
Mhm.
and
If
it's
they hold it.
normally they go like in, right?
Yeah.
The catfish will come up their arm, but she'd like put it through the gills
To
and
hold
her
it up
fist
with
was
it,
out the
right?
mouth
Yeah.
to hold it up, and I was like, what?
Oh.
And she goes, this is such a big catfish. She goes, I can do this, and it doesn't do any damage to the gills at all. And I was just like, what? They're the ugliest. Like I think all fish are pretty ugly.
Mhm.
Like fish. Like you get into sharks, like those are whatever. But I'm like, they're ugly, and catfish, I'm like, so freaking ugly.
There's a good TikTok right there. Mike's thoughts on fish.
Yeah.
It's true.
I caught a gaff top fin. I can't remember the name of it. Catfish the other night. It's got like this, like several of the fins are this way, but the one on top is like a mast. It's like 7 inches long. This big old, like a not a spear, but like a barb with like
Oh, yeah?
fins. So I was like, when I was trying to get the hook out, I'm like, I don't want to touch this thing. It's going to sting me. So had to be real careful.
Look at you guys
Yeah.
catching fish.
I caught one a couple weeks ago. I was going to eat. This guy that lives close to the place that I fish. So like it's this kind of concrete platform. And then underneath it, there's like a culvert that kind of runs under the street and goes way back to who knows where. And I had this catfish, and he's like, yeah, you can do what you want, but I wouldn't eat anything out of here. Lake City Poop Factory is right down the street and drains right into here. It's like supposedly when it comes out of there, it's drinkable water, but I don't know.
Poop factory.
So I threw it back.
Gross.
Yeah.
All right, well,
All right, we're gonna be the testes. We already were.
That's right. We all did 3 assessments, right? The Enneagram,
Mhm.
the attachment.
Which I think is kind of a variation of
Yeah,
the experiences and close relationship scale. If anybody's looking,
Which
Oh,
the
yeah.
Enneagram?
No, the
attachment one.
Yeah, I guess I looked at that and thought, if I wondered if that one was official too, if it was just like this is our because we also did a differentiation of self one that is clearly somebody's questionnaire to funnel you into their programs.
Kind of, but I think it comes from the actual
I was gonna say
differentiation of self scale, like short form.
stuff.
I think.
Yeah.
So it's a shorter one than the one that Murray Bowen wrote. But yeah, for people who are just sitting here thinking like, what the crap did you just say?
Yes.
So basically, we wanted to fill out questionnaires to assess our personality, our attachment style in relationships, and differentiation of self is basically like the degree to which we know how to separate our thoughts and feelings and maintain intimacy, closeness with people, and also autonomy, like still be an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So these are questionnaires that I frequently use with my clients to kind of just get an idea of several important things. But we wanted to know each other, and turns out we're very similar. Not like the alpha scale. We were all different on that one.
Where Rob was like
the
human social reject. They made up a category for like, this guy's basically a creepy weirdo you don't want around you. Stupid.
I was just a Delta, right?
Yeah.
Just like
the Delta?
The worker bee.
You were Delta.
You weren't a Beta?
No.
You were Delta and I was Gamma.
No, because the Beta wants to be the Alpha.
Oh, right.
But,
You're
lacks like the
worker bee.
Yeah, so I was just like the worker bee. Like,
and I'm the guy who's like,
just shut up and let me work.
I'm like Thenardier or
what?
No, it's is that who I'm thinking of? Master of the House?
Yeah.
It's like living in the slums and pickpocketing people, trying to make my way to the top.
but believes that he's
I'm actually
the master of the house.
Better than everybody else.
Yeah.
Just define the house.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually the alpha male. Gamma, you're the worst. Seriously, that guy made that scale. Whoever made that was like, then there's my brother Jerry. That guy's like Gamma.
I was gonna say, like, reading it was like, oh, clearly you have very clear ideas of what is negative.
Well, he's got very clear ideas of who's the alpha.
Yeah.
That's probably him.
How can I phrase these questions so I come out on top?
Dude, did I showed you. We should really get into this because I did have somebody else who was like, man, you guys kind of fart around for a long time. I was like, yeah, so it's fun about being on the show.
But
when we interview people,
you've said several people say that, but do they say it in a way where they're like, I wish you wouldn't? Or are they just
actually so far only one person has said it in a way that sounded like, I mean, you guys could get into the topic. I'm like, well, we're just kind of hanging out, man.
Yeah. Because I've heard people say, I've heard way more people than not say, and maybe more particularly men, I like that we can talk about deep things in a lighthearted way, so it feels like accessible.
Right. That's true.
Which I feel like was kind of our point when we started this was, like, we wanted it to feel like a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is what conversations with dudes feel like.
I think that is something that is probably misunderstood before we jump into this. Like, if you watch guys kind of get intense with each other and then kind of like, look at their phones or, talk about something else or whatever, I think we all kind of know, like, we all have feelings and they all get activated, but like, we know maybe better how, like, when we're interacting with each other to say, like, that just got elevated a little bit. And I know that the best way we bring that down is we kind of just go inward for a second and then we re-engage, and like, it doesn't feel weird to us,
right?
But it might look weird on the outside, like, oh man, that got really awkward. They just stopped talking. It's like, yeah, but they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like I'm just bringing my temperature down a second, and I'm not mad at you. I'm not going to, like, I'm not going to take something out on you because of what just happened. I'm just settling back down, and then I'll.
Well, that was we had that guest a while ago that talked about, I don't remember his name. Sorry, he's one of your guys' friends. The exercise guy,
Josh.
Yep,
Josh. Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe I completely misunderstood what he said, but he was talking about the benefits of running for a guy.
Oh yeah, and the regulation.
And it's that ability, like, that it can be really beneficial when they're doing it with their spouse, because it helps them, like when things start to get intense, they're able to refocus onto something kind of quickly without drawing attention to it, that kind of helps regulate, and then they can re-engage again.
Yeah. Well, and there's things too that we'll say that, like, people come to therapy thinking, here's my stuff I'm going to talk about, but they'll spend we can only tolerate about 2 minutes at a time of really intense stuff. So I tell my clients, like, that's why I joke, because we'll pull you back out for a second, and we'll go back in, and we'll pull you back out and go back in.
Right. Dunk you underwater, and then I'll give you some air.
It's perfect. I call it waterboarding. It's a new thing I came up with.
There you go. You should advertise your therapy with that, just like the teriyaki madness. Fire's so good, you'll feel it twice.
Seriously, that's the worst advertisement ever.
I seriously wanted to have a thing like this now, where it's like, take this assessment, and it will say, like, your score is here. If it's above 40, have you considered waterboarding treatment? Come to my office and I'll dunk you under the water for a little while. I'll give you a little bit of breath, and then I'll shove you back under.
I'll shove you back under.
So I'm going to give a little intro into these assessments, because I think it's important to have more context before we talk about our results. But so there are a ton of different personality assessments, and also assessments that are like specific for organizations and businesses and things like that. So everybody's got their best, right? Everybody says, like, oh, this one's the best or whatever, but I'm not saying this is the best, is what I'm saying, right? This is just, I'm going to say this is why I use this particular one. But so the thing I like about this one is it doesn't necessarily talk so much about dimensions of personality like the other ones do, like extroversion, introversion, openness, conscientiousness, all that stuff. It kind of taps more into, like, what are your core motivations and your core fears, and then it gives you a range, like, when you're at your healthiest, this is what you look like, and when you're at your unhealthiest, this is what you look like. So I think too often we talk about when you are unhealthy, like, you need to change, meaning like you need to become a different person. And it's like, well, I can't. So you get stuck in dialogues like, well, this is like who I am, so leave me alone, right? But I think if you look at it for yourself, and you can recognize, like, yeah, I'm not like this one-dimensional, object that needs to fit in some category. Because I hear people all the time say, like, well, I'm introverted here, but I'm extroverted here, and it's like, so I don't know what I am. It's like, you're you, right? And in this situation, we were talking about this a second ago, right? Like, so there's just more like fluidity to it. And I think this one fits really nicely with some of the other relationship assessments that I use. So the attachment one, we've talked about attachment before on here, but basically, like, attachment styles are just kind of like the habitual behaviors you engage in to regulate the closeness and distance between you and other people, particularly the people you're close with. So you'll get an attachment style if you fill something out like this. That doesn't mean like you're stuck there. It just means right now, or for maybe a larger part of my life, those are the behaviors or patterns I engage in, particularly when I feel like intimacy is involved. So if you're going to really see me, how do I feel about that, right? Do I move away from you? Do I cling to you to make sure you don't leave me? Or do I feel okay, being myself, connecting with you, being myself, connecting with you, back and forth. And the differentiation of self scale is similar. I think it gives you like, how emotionally reactive are you? So that's like how well are you able to separate thoughts and feelings, experience feelings, and also think objectively about something at the same time. And then the I position is more kind of like that attachment thing, right? Like, how well can I still be an individual while I'm in a relationship with you? Like, and then the other two dimensions are kind of the extreme ends of that I position spectrum, right? Like, do I get close to you and like fuse with you and like lose myself? Or when I get close to you, if there's any threat, I cut you off and the relationship's dead and I'm myself. So, I think those behaviors oftentimes interact really in important ways with your core fear and core motivation from the Enneagram.
And we can put links to all these, right? If our listeners want to take the same one we took,
we'll put the same ones that we took, but we might do a little bit more research into some other ones. These are ones I've used pretty regularly, but
They're not bad baselines.
No,
at
yeah,
least.
they're fine.
they're not bad. But I think that particularly, I'm always looking for better differentiation
Yeah.
of self
Yeah.
measurements because it's such an important concept. And for whatever reason, like
I think it's
there's so little written about it that is like
because
helpful.
it's actually, even among people who study family systems and Murray Bowen, I think it's for a lot of people,
Not
if you
very
ask
well
what it is, they're like,
Uh,
yeah. So people just kind of avoid it, like, yeah, it's
You know what's funny
Yeah.
though? Like, not to get too much into other topics, but it really like acceptance and commitment therapy.
Mhm.
Really, that's kind of what you do there, right? But I think to some of the points we've made before, what that teaches you to do is really identify like, what are my core values? Like, what are the values that I want to live out in my life?
Right.
And then what are the feelings that I experience, and how can I keep those two things from fusing? Like, I really want to be somebody who will just take public speaking because it's everybody's biggest fear. Like, I really, have a core value that I really want to share some important ideas in a meaningful way with lots of people, right? But I'm so afraid of getting in front of people, right? So what do I lead with, right? And I think that's what we usually say, like, well, I can't do it because it scares me too much, or we just kind of like dive in and aren't even aware of what's going on for us, and maybe we end up failing. But it's kind of the idea of like, I can live this value, I can feel this fear and live the value also, right? That can happen at the same time. So I think that's a bit of like the emotional reactivity piece of differentiation of self, but there's no good relational thing with ACT. But anyway, so we filled these out. Turns out,
Wow.
and I guess on the Enneagram, we should say you get a number.
Yeah.
So there's 9 different types, and you'll get a number, and it will tell you what that number is and a bunch of information about that number. And then it'll also tell you about what are called wings, which are on this basically diagram of all the different types of for the Enneagram. It's the 2 number types that are on either side of your number. So it's the interaction of your type with that other type. So it's like within me, I have a little, if I'm a 2, right? I have a little bit of 1, I have a little bit of 3, and like, what's that interaction like? So the wings basically just give you a little bit more information about how you might be acting or what you might be doing or motivated by. But
fascinating. I will say, what's funny to me about specifically the Enneagram is how many, like, I've talked to some people that this is like their new god.
Yeah.
It's like, this is everything to them. I feel
explains everything.
It's kind of like the what's the 2, the MMPI and the there's another one
For personality.
Yeah.
So the MMPI but it's more like a measure of different stuff now because of
right.
Yeah, but there's like the Myers-Briggs is a bit
Myers-Briggs
where you get the 4 letters.
So and people love that too. It's like,
yeah.
And people ask me, like, do you like this one? I'm like, I don't really like any of them. And they always get upset. And they're like, why? Last night when I was taking this, I was like, these questions, man, they're worded. It's like, yes, well, no, not when you add that part in.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to
There's
answer
some
that
like
question
weird
now.
double-barreled thing.
And so there was one that I looked at, or there was one that let me see if I took a picture of a couple of these questions because specifically of how they were worded. Nope. To impress, I may take on too much and make promises I can't keep.
Right.
And that one was interesting to me because the second half of that, I thought, like, I read it and I thought, oh, that's totally true. Like, I'm always like, I'll often say yes to people, and then like it's a struggle for me to actually do the things I say I'll do.
Yeah.
The first part, though, I thought, well, I don't know that I ever did it to impress people. And so, like, I had to actually pause and think, like, is that actually what my motivation is?
Right.
Because I want to impress these people. And I think until I paused, I just went off the second half of the statement.
Yeah.
I just kind of like, well, the second half is true, so I'll ignore the first half and I'll say this. But then I had to pause and think about it, and it actually shifted my score a little bit because I thought, yeah, I do that, but I've never had a conscious thought that I'm doing it to impress people.
Yeah.
So that they'll all be like, oh, I mean, look at Mike. That guy's, wow. Like, no, there was a need, and so I tried to fill it. And so I do think it requires a level of reflection that most people, if they're just doing it, probably aren't going to give because they're just going to kind of, like you did last night, kind of go through it.
Yeah, I tried to go through
which is usually how you're told to answer, right? Just go with your knee jerk. But it's fascinating to me because like something like this, you could say is like you having an intimate encounter with a questionnaire because it's seeking to know you, right?
Right.
And like people's reactions to it is also a good indicator of differentiation in a way, right? Because it's like the person who says like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever has really fused with the Enneagram, right? And somebody who's like, well, this is stupid, it doesn't answer anything, this is new, is totally emotionally cut off. But like, how can I be in a space where I can say nothing, like no questionnaire or anything is ever going to fully capture who I am,
Right.
This captures some important aspects that are helpful to me, and I want to receive that, and I also want to retain this idea that there's more to me than just this. So if I'm explaining myself, I will say this is a part of me, right?
Right.
And this is one way of looking at me, and it's important, and here's what I can learn from it. But
yeah,
there's more that we probably still need to talk about. Yeah.
Well, I will say, like, whenever I do any of these, because I don't know, I think they're fun. The color personality tests that we all did as kids, those are fun to me. They're all entertaining, and I can always see aspects of myself.
Yeah.
And so it's not like we're not saying these are inaccurate.
Yeah.
But the big struggle, and I've had it.
Yeah.
I've had it since I was working on my master's, was like, no, I would, and you talked about this last night, like the ability to kind of say, well, I know if I answer it this way, it's going to produce this outcome.
Right.
And so it does become really hard to not say, like, to answer honestly.
Yeah.
And for me, like, whenever I do questionnaires, I don't do extremes. And so I won't ever say always, and I won't ever say never. And so right there, I'm like, well, already it's off, because there are probably things that I do. I know, right?
I never
say
do
never
it or always.
But it's one of those where I think
I know.
the answers are already skewed, because I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, there's two answers that I'm just more or less flat out ignoring.
They're just off
well, those aren't, like, I'm not going to use them. So I think, the accuracy gets to be, for me, I'm
difficult.
like,
yeah. There was, I can't remember where I read this, but basically, like, the Harry Potter house quiz has like the same psychometric properties as like the Myers-Briggs is just as accurate, so it's like...
But that's what I
save time and learn something fun about yourself.
That's like when I see this stuff, I feel like kind of what you guys are saying. Well, take it as a part of a bigger whole, like
bigger conversation.
But too many people treat this like a diagnosis, like, oh, this is me, and it's like, I mean, I've taken the exact same assessments on different days or even different hours and gotten different results, because sometimes it's affected by the mood you're in.
Yeah.
And so if you just had a fight with your spouse and you sit down,
chances are you're not going to feel like you're.
Yeah. If you take the attachment thing, you're gonna be like, no, stupid jerk. Like, so your answer can come out different.
I think one thing to think about too is, to your point, like whatever score you get on something, or whatever type you become, or whatever, right? What that's saying to you is that's probably in that moment, but maybe over time, that's your most dominant thing, right? So you could be like on this, say, for example, I'll give it away, I'm a 2, right? But I've read stuff on 7s and I'm like, but 2 probably edges out a little bit over 7, right? So there's another, version of this where you can kind of like have like your top 3 or something. I can't remember, but these things you could dive into forever. And this particular one, the Enneagram, like the earliest writings about it were like 200 AD. Some of these ideas were kind of, so it's like these are things that have been talked about for a long, long time. And so I think that there's always going to be some movement and some discussion about things, and probably the same thing with attachment and differentiation. If you look back at like some of the Stoic stuff, it's totally,
there.
The emotional reactivity piece is there. So
that's what's funny. We'll start tying, maybe we'll start with the Enneagram first, since we're already kind of talking about it. But one of the things that's funny to me is when I say it's almost like people's God. This one I've had people say to me, like, this is essentially like ancient scripture that's come back. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I mean, these ideas are just kind of human principles that they,
right. And all we've done now is use just like statistics to create okay, this is a sound measure. So is the Harry Potter quiz.
So I too am a 2. We'll tell Mike is also a 2 on the Enneagram. So that you guys who don't know the Enneagram, some people really know exactly what a 2 is. The 2 is the helper. which is kind of like, yeah, okay. I said to Mike, I wonder if this would have been the same answer if I did this before I became a therapist, or is it like shifted? I do think it would have been the same because
Yeah.
I feel like this has always been me, but I don't know. Now I'm looking through the lens of me now.
Well, so I did years ago when I was trying to transition out of teaching before I decided to become a therapist. I took one of those kind of aptitude tests, like here's the career you'd be well suited for. What was number one on mine? Teaching. I was like, yeah, because this is all I know.
This is what I'm doing.
Like, this is what I've done for the last, at that point, it was, the last 7 or 8 years. And I thought, of course, this is what's going to come up high.
Yeah.
So again, is it any wonder that it, like, the questions are like, people are comfortable talking to me. My thought was, well, I hope so.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm not going to be able to support myself doing this.
Well, and so like, I mean, if we say more about there's two things to simplify the way they say it: their core desire and their core fear for Enneagram. For the helper, the core desire is to be loved and needed, which is true for me. And the core fear is being unwanted, which is also true for me.
Yeah.
Like if I feel unwanted or unneeded, it's like, crap, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there were some things as I scroll down and I'm like, I don't know if I believe in that, or I've worked on that. So like, as you go down, it says, 90% empathetic. You're a safe space for vulnerability.
Yours was 90% too, huh?
And is this me or is this saying everyone?
What was your self-confident? I thought it was me based off of my results.
My self-confident is 30%.
Oh, I think this might just be if you're this,
I think this category is kind of this, right? Because
your also needs approval was
85.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's saying low. You struggle with saying no.
Right. Which is really funny because it says needs approval. You always want to help and never get tired. And I think needs approval sounds negative. That other thing doesn't sound negative.
Great. Yeah.
That other thing sounds great.
Right.
Yeah.
And also this
first one, I think, if I told someone, if someone came and said, I really struggle, like I always need someone's approval, I'd be like, all right, well, let's work on that. But if someone came to me and said, I love to help people and I never seem to get tired, I'd be like, great. That's like, lean into that then by all means.
It's funny because I look at this too, and I think the struggle with saying no, I kind of wondered, how does this take into account what I've worked on? Like, I feel like, especially being a therapist, I've had to learn, like, no, I will just say no to you.
Yeah.
And I thought of a recent thing where someone wanting to work with me, and despite kind of this push and push and push, the answer was no.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, my life is going to go this way. It's like, no. It felt like, I was kind of like, hey, often I'd be like, well, I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
So
I think that's where, though, the three of these together gives a bigger picture.
Right.
Because, I like this will say generally in this type, same thing, right? 85% needs approval, 30 low or self-confident. But even there, you could argue like, okay, so self-confidence is defined as how well you can say no.
Right.
Like that, to me, that doesn't speak self-confidence, right? But your ability to say no, I think if you look at and we'll get to this, like when you're in a healthy space, when you're in your healthiest space with wanting to be loved, wanted, and helpful, sometimes no is the best way to give love, right? So I think if it's, if you're thinking about differentiation and you feel like because I'm a 2 on the Enneagram and I have like such a strong desire to feel wanted, if I am like beating up on myself and telling myself I'm not good enough and telling myself I need to earn other people's approval and love to be able to feel it, kind of like we talked about last week, then I'm going to be more susceptible to saying yes to any request without thinking anything more about it other than me, right? I need to do that so I feel good, right?
Right.
But if you're in a healthier place where you're not beating yourself up and you're thinking, hey, you know what? I am lovable. I'm okay, right? Then when somebody asks, whatever they ask you, right? Can you do this for me? Then you're better able to separate out your thoughts from your feelings about that person. You're better able to think about the relationship, and you can say, like, what is the best thing for you right now, right? Is it for me to say, no, I think you can do that, right? And I think you will feel better if you do. I'll cheer you on, right?
Right.
Or is it, I really see your struggle, right? And maybe my feelings are like, oh, don't do that, right? But I'm thinking, and I'm like, hold on, this person's had a really hard time, and you're maybe just feeling a little bit burned out, but do you have more in the tank? Like I can give, I can help this person out. And that's the best way to show love in this situation. It just gives you more. I think when you're at your healthiest, you have the ability to do that differentiation stuff better. Or you could say the reverse. The better you're doing the differentiation stuff, it puts you in a healthier place on this scale. But yeah, I think playing them off each other gives not the full picture, but I think it gives a better picture.
Yeah, it's interesting that even as you're saying that stuff, I'm thinking about all three of these scales we did and how this is why I think you can't put too much stock in any one thing, any one diagnosis, any one type of, assessment, like, because it's just one part of a picture. So I think to me, by the way, if I come back to this, the Enneagram thing, it's the one I have. Maybe it's the same thing is true of the attachment one. I just have a problem with the differentiation one at the end, but I feel like I didn't think I look at this and thought, oh shoot. But one of the things I wonder is, after doing this, I thought, maybe I'll ask you guys, do you believe you can then decide, well, I want to develop these other types? Is there value in that, of saying, well, I want to be more a number 9? I don't even know what I've got to see what they are, but or is it like, don't bother? Because this can also sound like this is you, like you were born this way. Don't fight it.
I think there's truth in, like, there are different, if there weren't different types of people,
right?
Then we wouldn't have the society and economy and, social relationship structures that we do. So I think from that angle, I don't think it's really wise to try and be everything, but it is interesting because that is kind of a very 2 type of thing, right? Like, I want to be loved. What if I'm everything?
What if I could
be everything to everybody, right? Like, so I think it's tempting to think that way.
I didn't even think of it that way.
But I also think, like, let me just give an example, right? So if somebody who's really, just maybe like really into everybody being treated the same, given the same opportunities, or, kind of doesn't like to be above anybody. Like, if everybody was like that, then, like, who would ever want to be a leader? Who would ever want to make hard decisions that disappoint people, right? So, like, we need people like that. And we all, might be critical of those people at times, but if we don't have people like that, then things don't work, right? And if everybody was like that and nobody ever took anybody's feelings into account, it was always like number 1 is like, really focused on doing what's right and like being just and things like that. We need people like that, right? But if somebody is so focused on that they're not taking into account gray areas, they're not motivated by people's feelings, right? Then again, you'd have a really kind of cutthroat world in a way, right? So I think there's when I'm working with couples, there's a lot of power in identifying how you're different so that you can see systemically, like, how are we in a complementary type of relationship, and the things we're trying to cut out, what would we lose, right, if we cut that out? I have to see both sides of this. I have to see where this is benefiting our relationship and also where it's a challenge. And rather than thinking, I need you to be different, right, fundamentally, I have to acknowledge that for us to have this part of our relationship, I have to also learn to not judge and not be critical of and not try and change this part of you, because you're a whole person. I can't just cut your arm off and say, cool, come on, right? But I hear you. I think it is. I've definitely felt all that stuff from the 2 place, right? Where it's like, hey, what if I could do this?
This. But I do think what you're saying too, as I think about the other 2 assessments we'll talk about, I feel like those ones are more where you could say, I want to develop this kind of style. And I think you should. Different than this one that's a little more personality based. Because I do think these ones are helpful to say, okay, look, I know if this is kind of where, because this one, when I got a 2 and I got the helper, I was like, yeah, I know that one already. So there are already traits I know about myself. And so I know it's kind of interesting. You can go on their website and you can see, like, this is how a 2 matches with a 9 or a 7 and so that's kind of interesting to see. This is where these 2 might conflict.
And if you have couples fill it out, they're like, oh crap, we're compatible.
Yeah, which can, because that's what I mean. People put too much stock in it.
Too much, we
should have
got married.
Yeah, instead of saying, and sometimes I don't think there's anything wrong with leaning into different parts of your personality. Say, well, you struggle with saying no, so learn to say no a little more.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can still be a number 2 who's a helper, but also has a good, healthy boundary of, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, that's like going back to Dr. Barkley, not Charles.
Bark.
When he talked about this idea, like every child is born with, 400 personality traits, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, they're just there. They're going to come out in time. So you can make sure they come out in an environment that's conducive to it, or you can not. And I think, yeah, if that's true, then I don't know how much we would be able to do to change our Enneagram that much.
Right.
Right. Like I'm a 2. Yeah. Chances are I could adapt, I could adopt probably aspects, but let's be honest. If you go and read through all 9, you will find aspects of yourself in all of them.
Right.
Why? Because we're much more complicated than the 180 questions. It was a lot of questions.
Yeah,
It was.
We're much more complicated than the 180 questions that they asked. And like what the other question that I took a picture of, which was so interesting to me, was morals and ethics are more important than compassion and tolerance. And that to me, I thought that is such a complicated question.
Yeah.
Like I thought, how you want me to scale that? Like good suck. No, I can't scale that thing. Like I got to have like let me explain my reasoning here. And so I'm like, nope. They gave me 5 options and I had to pick the one that I felt was best. And I thought, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But it ended up being right. Like to me, I think that's apparently the difference between a 1 and a 2 is for a 1, morals and ethics is going to trump every time.
Yeah.
For a 2, compassion and trust was the other one, right?
Yeah.
Are going to play a much bigger role. And I think, oh, that's that becomes a very significant aspect of what differentiates those 2.
Yeah.
And so like I said, to me, it was so complicated that
it is tough. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that question alone, you can kind of play out into conversations, right? Where it's like, we really need to ground our kid because they broke this rule. Right.
Right.
And, maybe the other parent saying like, well, you know what, they're just learning how to manage time or whatever. Right. Like maybe we should go easy and just kind of have a conversation. It's like those 2 things play off of each other. And I think rather than doing what we normally do, right, which is like, to Rob's point, we could say like, well, I'm a 1, so I have to make sure we ground them. Or, well, I'm a 2, so I have to make sure they know we love them and I feel loved by them. Right. Like it's more like, how do we honor both of these things, and how, like, what's the influence? How do we retain as much of, the moral or justice part of this, ethical part of it? And how do we honor the most that we possibly can with this, right? Like, what does that combination look like? And I think that's where, like, when you put all sorts of different types of people together and they're bringing the maximum amount of the good they offer together. Like those interactions create something totally new. Right. But we don't ever get there, 'cause it's like, well, it's this or this, right? Or, my way is better than your way, which really what you're saying is like the way that the things I'm motivated by, I'm going to assert them so hard that you just bend. Right. And that's not a relationship, right? Then you get into kind of like that emotional cutoff dimension of differentiation, or kind of the anxious avoidant dynamic, between 2 people.
As a side note, I'm sitting here as you guys are talking. My brain is also, because I want to move on to this next one too, the attachment one, and then move into the last one. But I'm sitting here wondering, I wonder if I went to a therapy conference, which is full of weird people, just so everybody knows.
Therapists are weirdos.
And asked everyone to fill out this Enneagram, how many would come out as 2s?
Yeah, there's probably an overrepresentation, I would think.
And maybe I wonder if it's, what's interesting is I could wonder what would be different in like actual medical, medical field. Would that be different?
Like a hospital?
Yeah.
Would that be
saying, hey, doctors and nurses?
Like, would you see nurses more with the helpers and doctors more with a different type?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
All the studies we could do that someone's probably already done. So now we're moving on to attachment, and to briefly explain attachment. Awesome. Well, I mean, essentially, attachment is just how, I'll just say it this way, how you relate and connect to other humans. Is that too oversimplified? Inside of a relationship?
No, I think, it's like
inside of
what you do to manage that.
Yeah, and specifically, I would say inside of like significant, important relationships. So there's early childhood development attachment that happens even within your first year of life to your primary caregiver, and then there's the adult attachment that we like things like emotion-focused therapy and other ones will use attachment styles that they pull in and talk about are you secure, or one of the other 3 types that are all insecure.
Yeah, I think that another thing to add to that is like. It's complicated as an adult because you have to take both sides of this into account, right? But like, but anything I do with you, when I'm wanting closeness with you, maybe, is like centered on what do I know about how to get your attention,
Right.
and what do I know about how to get you to respond appropriately or make it likely that you'll respond appropriately. And that's why like we've talked about before, the first part of that is attention. So if I know pissing you off gets your attention, or walking away from you and sulking gets your attention,
right,
I'll go with that without really thinking about what kind of response I'll get. And then the response usually is off. And then anyway, but yeah, I would say attachment is primarily about attention.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And specifically without knowing it, trying to get the thing we need.
Yeah.
The attention is
attention related to like, I need you close.
Yeah, this tells me I'm valuable. It tells me I'm loved, and I'm going to be safe. And then there's different types, and the 4 types. There's dismissing attachment, disorganized attachment, preoccupied attachment. Those are the insecure types. And then there's just secure, which is the 4th type. So, and this assessment, it asks questions about different groups, like your primary caregiver 1 and 2, like your mom and dad, and then your partner in general. But in general, what was your, I'll just say, what was your overall result?
So I did it twice.
Mike didn't like his, so he lied his way through to get a better score.
I lied my way through to get a better score.
Did you get a better score or a worse one?
No, I got it. Well, better. I got a different score.
Okay.
So the first time I took it, despite having secure attachments with mom, dad, and partner, my general attachment was preoccupied. And so and pretty high anxiety. And so my overall classification was anxious preoccupied, which there were aspects of it I disagreed with, right? Like attachment style is characterized by low feelings of self-esteem and self-worth, but also of holding others in high regard. And I think, yeah, I do that. But then the more I read it, there were some that I didn't agree with. And I went back and did it again because I knew there was at least 1 or 2 questions where I answered them because I thought they were asking me how I am, but really they were asking me how the caregiver interacted with me.
Okay.
And so that totally flipped those things, because I thought as a kid, I couldn't express myself to my parents because I was a kid. Like, what do I know? No, they were wondering how well my parents could read what I was going through and interact with it. So I thought, oh, all right. But I still, I came back better on that one. When I redid it, I came back as securely attached. But as we were talking before, Matt, thinking about it, it really is more about the level of relationship I have with whoever I'm dealing with. To the general public, am I going to let them know?
Yeah, some of the
am I going to be super open with that? Yeah,
emotions, deep emotions with this person.
Yeah, and I'm I'm not going to do that with you have to reach a level of friendship with me if we're going to start talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's not just going to be something I do the second time I meet you. And so that was where the preoccupied attachment came from. And because I do I think we've talked about this on here before. There are times where my base level of functioning is no one in the room actually likes me. They all just tolerate me.
Right.
It doesn't.
Just pretty much what goes on here. So.
Oh yeah. All the time. Yep. I'm a lot better than I used to be.
Both directions.
Oh, nah. But this one, there was a lot that I as I read through it, I thought, I don't know that I actually agree with everything it says, but.
Well, I think it's funny with this one, and because mine came out secure. All mine were in the secure. There are various points inside the secure, and that's in fact my mother and father one were pretty much exactly the same. And my most solid one was my relationship with my wife. But what I think is funny about this particular, I've always kind of thought this is funny about attachment styles, is they're secure, and there's nothing bad to say about secure.
Yeah.
And then there's all these, there's these 3 different types of you're a mess. What kind of mess are you if you're insecure? And so that part has always felt a little funny to me. So as I read through this, I'm it's congratulations. And it's got all these things. It's boy, I sound like the most amazing person on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I feel well, what do I work on? Nothing. I am nailing it.
Well, and that's when you read the secure attachment one, there's a paragraph that talks about, it says, congratulations, having a secure attachment style is great news. Either your needs were adequately met during your formative years, or else you worked hard at your relationships and circumstances to get where you are emotionally in life. And I think, that's interesting. it will acknowledge like, no, you could have gotten here by work. You may not have started out this way, but you got here.
Yeah,
but it can also imply if you're not there, it's because you haven't worked hard enough, right?
Right.
Which I think is also like, but I think to your point about two things with this. And this, depending on the questionnaire, you could say that the differentiation of selves, like the things that scale values are probably more like amenable to male socialization, and the attachment one probably more to female socialization, and particularly like Western ideas of how to like we value expression of emotion, right? Yeah. But attachment looks so different depending on the culture, right? And so I think that I guess when you think about like looking at couple relationships strictly from an attachment perspective, which a lot of couples stuff does, I think it misses so many other important dimensions of relationship functioning. That's why I like at least these three together, because it taps into what are our core differences, right? What do we do to build an emotional bond with each other? It's the attachment. And then how do we maintain autonomy while still maintaining the closeness, the differentiation piece, right? And I think all of those things are three very critical aspects of healthy relationship functioning. There's more, but I don't like, if I looked at this and it's just like, well, you're avoidant, and I'm anxious,
right?
And I'm only anxious because you're avoidant. Well, I'm only avoidant because you're anxious. Well, who's going to go first, right?
Right.
How do we get to secure? Do I have to like, and again, there's like specific approaches to couples therapy that say like, here, let me calm you down, anxious person, because you're angry, so that you'll just express how you actually feel, and then the other person will reemerge from his avoidance, and then you have this bond, right? Which, cool, that works, but that's not the only thing that's going on in the relationship,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I will say, like, looking back, I think, if I'd done the attachment thing early in my marriage, because it's almost 25 years for me now. If I'd done it early in my marriage, there's no way I would have been securely attached early in my marriage. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so I think that is something to take into consideration. Like, where are you in your relationship?
Yeah. Developmentally,
there are all things we hide in the early parts of our relationship because we're not sure what's going to happen if we let them out. And to think that all goes away when you get married, no, that's just naive.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not going to go away just because you got married. It's not like, well, I said I do, so now I'm instantly securely attached. That's not the way this works. You still have to build and develop that trust. And it's still this, I'm going to give you a little bit and see how you react. And then I'm going to decide whether I want to give more. And that's, I think, where that attachment comes from, right? Is like with mom and dad at a young age, it's what we talked about. We're expressing a need and they're giving us what we need, and in a healthy way. And so we become securely attached, right? We don't have to resort to tantrums and screaming and whatever, because we express the need and they feel the need. And so that works. Okay. As a child, you're not thinking about it. As an adult, you are. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Well, and I appreciate with this one that it does say, where it says, or you've worked hard, because I do feel like not necessarily that you have, like, if you're not there, it means you haven't worked hard.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea of telling somebody, hey, this is not set in stone.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that was good about adult attachment when they started saying, hey, wait, we think this is happening again as adults. Because originally it was like, this stuff is formed and this is it. This is you now. Kind of like, this is the luck of the draw based on the parents you got.
Yeah.
But then but be able to say, wait, you can shift this. I think it's really valuable to say, if you don't feel good in that space, if you're not feeling secure with your partner, or even with your parents, you can go back and do work with your parents.
Yeah.
So I think it matters to know that you can shift in these different spaces.
These aren't like, this isn't like a personality. Like this is your type, right?
It's just more like, you're not stuck here. This is
right.
These are the behaviors you engage in.
Now.
These are the habitual ways you interact, and you can change that. Yeah. I was same as you, secure and kind of, everybody in kind of different.
Plotted,
yeah. But one of the things I think that is, this was on like a big questionnaire that we used in a number of studies about basically like premarital predictors of marital outcomes. And one of the family of origin, like your relationship with your parents questions was, to what extent have you come to terms with any issues that, have resulted between you and your parents growing up or something like that? And like that item alone was a huge predictor of people being able to move. Right. So like you're saying, and same thing in a couple relationship, like how do you come to terms with that? Right. Do you come to terms with that by telling the other person how much they hurt you and like coercing them to change their behavior? No. Right. You come to terms with how things impacted you. You have compassion and curiosity about, the person that you interacted with, and you have conversations with them. Right. And sometimes that does lead to healthier interactions going forward. Right. Other times it doesn't necessarily lead to behavior change, but it leads to you feeling, I guess, less insecure about what happened. And I've seen lots of people kind of come to a place of saying things like, yeah, my parents did the best they could. Right. And like, I know who I am. I know how to connect with people. And, maybe my relationship with my parents has really improved, but maybe it's not, ideal or whatever. They say a number of different things like this. And like, I think that like releasing yourself from kind of that fear, right, which is really what some of those insecure types are based on, is like a fear of, I can't, like, I'm not enough to get somebody's attention. They don't care about me. They don't respond appropriately. We have no bond. And I'm not going to say that it's just like you do those things and you're magically cured. It's super hard work, right? But yeah, to your point, these are things that you can work on and develop different ways of interacting with your feelings about who you are and who you are in relationship to other people.
Well, and that's partly because of the time we're already at in this episode. I think that moves me kind of in a way over to the differentiation of self one that I took again this morning, or as we were sitting here, because my score went away and my scores came out, I would say, worse. So this is what cracks me up, because when you're saying that stuff about the secure attachment, I think to me, so much of secure attachment also ties into this
differentiation of self.
Yeah, more or less differentiated self, essentially, because if I feel more able to say, well, here's this feeling I have, and I don't have to, it's not driving my actions, or then I'm going to approach you in a very different way. Right. And so that's part of how I work on this, in addition to how do I engage with you.
Well, I'll say this about these last two, the attachment and the differentiation, because the personality one, depending on, like you said, maybe you'll fill it out and it'll meander all over the place, and it's just describing different parts of you, but you're not trying to necessarily like improve in those areas. But with these last two, they're not truly outcome measures, but they can be. Like if you're working on stuff, fill it out every 2 months and see how you're shifting. Now I don't react as emotionally, or people aren't saying that I'm emotionally reactive, or
that's actually interesting, because remember back in the clinics, Auburn did it, at Texas Tech did it, where it was like we do periodic. They had every 4 sessions they had to do assessments again. So you could see, is this having any effect? And we use it for publications and things like that. But it'd be interesting just to have clients to say, well, go fill this out every 4 weeks and see, so you can see yourself. Is this, do you feel like you're moving the direction you want to move?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. But here's what I wanted to jump into that made me laugh. This is because I had some issues with this one. My emotional cutoff score was 61 this time.
Wow.
Out of 100, which
was
is not
the highest before.
It's not great. I know. No, I was 54 yesterday. I remember that.
Way to go, Rob.
And my emotional reactivity, this one cracks me up. I'm a 46.
Now, you scored above 44. You should probably take the Alleviate Anger class.
That's my favorite. It's like, if you're above 44, you should sign up for our Alleviate Anger. I was like, what?
You should spend money if you're above this score.
Especially because it asks questions like, I'm often, I'm worried about, I get too emotional, or people have said I'm too emotional. And it's like, no, I'm all the way over on the far. So I'm like, how did I get a 46?
Well, there's questions here about stress.
44? I know. There's a couple of things. There's some sneaky ones.
Yeah.
That and like I said, this one, I think, like you said, Matt, this one's a hard one. I actually think this principle is one of the most important principles in therapy, period. The differentiation of self. And being able to feel the full spectrum. I had one of my clients come in and pick up that feeling wheel over there. And he's like, look, Rob, like 3/4 of this thing are bad emotions. And I said, no, they're just emotions, man. He's like, no, like anger, that's not good. I said, it's just an emotion. So, but we believe they're bad. And I think the more we can have this differentiated self, it's like, no, I can feel this and I don't have to do anything with it. I am angry right now, but I'm not driving off a cliff or whatever it is. I can just hold this emotion.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the most valuable principle, because you will show up differently inside of relationships if you have that. So that's why, like, I look at these scores and I think, I wish there was a really solid scale that was easily accessible
and easily interpretable, and
Right.
like had cutoffs
Right.
and like some sort of. I like that there are subscales, but you had 61 on
61, my emotional cutoff, which I
had 57, you had 58. So screw you guys. Let's end this episode right now.
because it was
That's what it sounds.
I'm going to cut off this scale. See what I did there? Hey-o! Okay.
No, going back to like being able to recognize, and this is where I really appreciate differentiation. And like we've talked about this. I've spent years trying to address my anger,
Right,
and trying to interact with it differently. And it became such a focus for me that I found myself, when I would be in my classroom with my students, being able to recognize as I approached it my tipping point, where I knew if I keep going, I'm going to say something I regret. I will feel like I don't have control of myself.
right.
If I stop right now, then I can keep it in check. And so then, like, the more I was able to do that, the more I started to be able to say, like, okay, is the anger useful right now? And it became, instead of this emotion that was controlling me, it became something that I could use kind of as a tool.
Right.
Because anger is a positive thing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of our social change comes from, is because people get angry and say, enough, I'm done with this. And I think, right, if we weren't angry, then some of that stuff's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so which is also the example I use when people are like, well, it's a bad emotion. I'm like, is it?
Right.
Like, here's a good example of it.
The things that come from it can be bad.
Right.
Yeah,
which is,
there's
that's
something different between feeling angry and getting pissed.
Right.
Right.
And that's where that's the other thing that I will always draw attention to with them, is the idea of, no, it's not, the emotion itself is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this thing that we feel. It's what we do with it after.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the more you become aware of those emotions, the more you're able to kind of say, okay, well, what do I want to do with this?
Yeah.
Like, here it is, and I can't stop it from coming. It's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But what do I want to do with it now that it's here?
That's that really important dimension of the emotional reactivity, right? Like, I can feel the feeling and think about it. Usually what happens is the feeling, maybe based on like our just knee-jerk interpretation or physiological reaction to its presence, drives the thought. Like, the thought is like, this is here, it shouldn't be here, why is it here?
Yep.
Right. And so the only way I can make this go away is to punish you, control you, distance myself from you, right? And if you slow it down, like you're saying, and it's just like, okay, hold on, I'm feeling angry, why?
Yeah.
Right? Or should, is there a reason for sustained anger? Was it just a temporary reaction? Like, what? Yeah, just separating the thoughts and feelings is
right.
Well, and that's one of my favorite things about kind of that exercise that you're talking about, is the idea of looking at, I was asking someone yesterday the difference between venting and like trash talking.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of went back and forth with it for a minute and was struggling to do it. And I said, look, can we say that venting is you're complaining about a situation, and trash talking is you're complaining about a person?
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh yeah, no, I like that. And I think, right, when I work with people, I'll often talk about this idea of like, look, you need to recognize what you're feeling and then identify what it is. And spoiler alert, it's not the person. It's something they're doing or something that they've said. It's not the actual individual themselves that's doing that. It's an action that they were a part of, but we tend to attribute it in the emotional moment to the individual. And we blame that individual instead of saying, well, yeah, I didn't like that you made me feel, that this statement was very dismissive to me. But helping them kind of see and separate the event from the individual.
Yeah.
Where it's not excusing the individual. Like, no, they still said it. They're responsible for what they said. Like, it's not my way of saying, well, we shouldn't. No, they said it. They got to own it. But it is recognizing it was the statement that made you feel that way, not.
Yeah. And to be fair, this is hard work. We all apparently are hovering right around needing the alleviate anger course.
Well, here's the.
I came in just below.
I did too. I was just 42.
Yep, 40. I got the lowest.
I was going to say originally I was 41.
Sure you were.
Now I'm
Rob.
46.
I still had the lowest.
But here's what I think is interesting. That I'll just say this. Oh, Matt's
That's
gonna
not
call.
supposed to happen.
I'll just say these because I do think maybe a take-home message. I'll share mine, and you guys can share yours if you have one. But one of the things I find interesting about this particular assessment is that I can have a high emotional cutoff score and also have a high eye position score. Because the eye position is like, it's kind of like
the higher the better.
Yeah,
on
like
that one,
I can regulate this. And emotional cutoff is like, I can't tolerate this intense emotion, so I'm cutting you off. How do I have high on both?
Yeah.
But here's the kind of one of my take homes is in all of three of these assessments, it's saying with anything you do, kind of like we're saying in the beginning of like, take the information you get and kind of incorporate into the bigger whole. You can't just take one piece and say, well, this is it. This now defines me. I should be able to take this and say, even this emotional cutoff, when I got a score that high, I was like, what? I don't think I've ever done that to anybody.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting. I think it's always helpful to say, I don't know. Are there ways in my life where I have?
Right.
Like if I took that, could I see, oh, maybe I have done that and maybe I need to work on these things. And because of these last two scores or assessments we're talking about, those two are saying, you can change this. I guess I need to take the anger course.
Well,
I'm so mad about
How
that.
do you feel about that?
With the emotional cutoff one, like, I think I understand why my score was that high.
I don't, but go ahead.
Well, like to me, I think, yeah, because I don't open myself emotionally to people that I'm not comfortable with.
Well, and again, this is one of those like, does it take into account? This isn't a very like gender or culturally sensitive scale, right? So like some of the things, like if the expectation is that you will behave this way, like where's that coming from? There was another one in here that I was like, why is that? Why there's an underlying assumption and expectation embedded in that question, and who's to say that's healthier? It's based on this theory of how we manage the anxiety of life and how that plays out in relationships and stuff. But yeah,
but that's so like based on the initial number and realizing like, yeah, I guess I do kind of cut people off emotionally. Like I'll still interact with them, but I no longer will be vulnerable with them, right? As if it reaches a certain point.
Yeah.
But then when I went into it and read the actual thing, you appear aloof and isolated from others. And I think I don't know that anyone's ever described me.
Yeah. But I can see elements where I can line up with some of those things.
I could, but the next one was my favorite. You display an exaggerated face of independence. And I thought, I've never been accused of that.
Yeah, that's
the hard part about this one too is whereas the attachment one and the Enneagram one kind of describe, based on where you landed, here's a description of you, right?
Right.
This is just based on this concept. Here's what it looks like at its worst.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah. So it's not a personalized.
Yeah, that's what you're seeing there is 100. Right. I got 61 out of that. But that's why I say to me, one of the take home is, hey, look, I can pull information out of any of this and keep improving myself.
Yeah.
Even with the Enneagram, I think, yeah, but I could work on elements of this. If I don't personally like the idea that I can't say no. So if that's something I struggle with, then I'm going to work on that.
Right.
And I can still be a helper and work on that.
Yeah.
So I think my take home would just be, I don't know, an interesting question. If you feel a need to identify yourself by one of these, I think a good question to ask is why.
Yeah.
Like, why is it important to you that this is the thing that identifies you, right? Why is it important to you that you're a 2 or a 9 or whatever number you are? And just kind of reflect on it. Like that, to me, that's the benefit of all of these is it does force you to stop and kind of say, how is this test producing this results based off my answers, right? Like, what is it? Like Rob said, what are there ways in my life that this is actually showing up that maybe I haven't been aware of until today? Okay, great. There's nothing wrong with that. Look at it and evaluate it and question, like, if there's something that you have a strong emotional reaction to, ask why. And spend time trying to understand that aspect of yourself.
Yeah. So my takeaway comes from seismology.
Oh,
so I don't know a ton about this, but over time I do know that I think knowledge of structures in earthquake-prone places has probably gone from like, okay, the earth shakes, let's build this thing as solid and rigid as we can, to kind of like combat this thing that will happen at some point. Yeah. And we all know what happens there. And now it's like, steel structures and highly flexible
Yeah, let's make it as flexible as we can.
And so I think the deeper you know yourself, like these are kind of core, kind of deep-seated desires and fears, and the deeper you know and understand yourself, you'll be better able to build kind of behavioral and cognitive and emotional structures that can roll with these things, because they're just going to happen, right? You're going to be affected deeply when you're in relationship with other people or just doing life. Like you're gonna have strong reactions, right? So if you are able to understand those and not say, well, I'm just not going to get angry anymore, it's like, well, good luck with that, right? I'm just going to like create cracks in my teeth because I'm gritting my teeth so hard, right? Like I think you can develop flexibility in the absence of knowledge of these things, but I don't know that my personal opinion is that like change at the surface doesn't trickle down as well as like understanding at the depths informs change at the surface.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that seismology thing. So, spaceman, know thyself, and catch us next time on The Man Space. Testes, unite!
I hope they don't unite. Untie!
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to
rate
and
review.
Please, we desperately need it.